Ever take a shortcut through a dark wood? Ever whistle after dark? Ever rob a graveyard? Well, these people did. I'm Karin Shah. Welcome to Psychomanteum. One winter's evening, the sexton's wife was sitting by the fireside with her big black cat, Old Tom, on the other side, both half asleep and waiting for the master to come home. They waited and they waited, but still he didn't come, till at last he came rushing in, calling out, "Who's Tommy Tildrum?" in such a wild way that both his wife and his cat stared at him to know what was the matter. "Why, what's the matter?" said his wife. "And why do you want to know who Tommy Tildrum is?" "Oh, I've had such an adventure. I was digging away at old Mr. Fordyce's grave when I suppose I must have dropped asleep and only woke up hearing a cat's meow." "Meow," said old Tom in answer. "Yes, just like that. So I looked over the edge of the grave, and what do you think I saw?" "Now, how can I tell?" said the sexton's wife. "Why, 9 black cats, all like our friend Tom here, all with a white spot on their chestises, and what do you think they were carrying? Why, a small coffin covered with a black velvet pall, and on the pall was a small coronet all of gold, and at every third step they took they cried all together, 'Meow, meow,'" said old Tom again. "Yes, just like that," said the sexton. "And as they came nearer and nearer to me, I could see them more distinctly, because their eyes shone out with a sort of green light. Well, they all came toward me, 8 of them, carrying the coffin, and the biggest cat of all walking in front for all the world like— But look at our Tom, how he's looking at me. You'd think he knew all I was saying." Go on, said his wife. "Never mind old Tom." "Well, as I was a-saying, they came toward me slowly and solemnly, and at every third step crying all together, 'Meow, meow,'" said old Tom again. "Yes, just like that, till they came and stood right opposite Mr. Fordyce's grave, where I was. When they all stood still and looked straight at me, I did feel queer, that I did. But look at old Tom, he's looking at me just like they did." Go on, said his wife. "Never mind old Tom." Where was I? "Oh, they stood still looking at me, when the one that wasn't carrying the coffin came forward and, staring straight at me, said to me— yes, I tell 'ee, said to me, with a squeaky voice, 'Tell Tom Tildrum that Tim Tildrum's dead.' And that's why I asked you if you knew who Tom Tildrum was. For how can I tell Tom Tildrum Tim Tildrum's dead if I don't know who Tom Tildrum is?" Look at old Tom, screamed his wife. And well he might look, for Tom was swelling, and Tom was staring, and at last Tom shrieked out, "What? Old Tim dead? Then I'm the king of the cats!" and rushed up the chimney and was never more seen. One night, when the leaves had fallen and frost silvered the bare black limbs of the trees under the moonlight, a farmer was returning home after taking his cows to market. He was in a good mood, since his purse was fat with coins, so he decided to take a shortcut through the woods rather than follow the road, so he could stop at a tavern and enjoy a beer before he went home. It was much darker in the woods, and his mood lowered a bit, but he just strode a little faster. As he walked, he began to get the sensation he was being watched. He started to look around when suddenly something heavy landed on his back. He jerked to throw it off, but nothing he did could dislodge it. To his horror, he realized the thing on his back was a myling, the damned soul of a child who died unbaptized in the forest after being abandoned there. "Take me to the graveyard," it demanded. "Hallowed ground will let me rest." Knowing he couldn't throw off the supernatural entity, the farmer turned toward the local cemetery and started to run. But as he ran, the child's soul became heavier. Soon he could only jog, but still the myling became heavier again, until it was like having a yearling calf over his shoulders. Now he could only sling one foot in front of the other, but still the thing on his back got heavier. The farmer dragged his body forward, reached the edge of the woods, and in the distance he could see the gates of the graveyard. 1 foot, and then another. He struggled forward with the myling growing ever heavier, until his feet began impossibly to sink into the frozen ground. Still, he fought to move. But now his legs were deep in the ground, and he could only scrabble at the dirt with his hands, unable to get any closer. Then the being on his back howled in rage, and he knew no more. In the morning, his wife gathered a search party, but though they found his purse still loaded with his profits from the market within yards of the cemetery, he was never seen again. One night, an auto rickshaw driver huddled under the canopy of his auto and cursed under his breath. He was forced to navigate the twisting Marve mud road between the looming mangrove trees in the dark as rain poured down. He had promised his wife he would only work before sunset. As a lifelong resident of Malad in Mumbai, she feared the ghost of Mud Road more than anything else. She said a bride on her wedding night had been murdered by her groom. His wife claimed the bride had been purposefully driven into a tree by her new husband, who leaped from the car at the last minute and then disposed of his bride's dead body in the mangroves. Now she wandered the road, causing fatal accidents. It had been easy to brush off the story in the light of day, but now, as his headlights barely pierced through the gloom, he swore he could hear the chiming of anklets over the roar of his engine. The sound ebbed and flowed, becoming softer and then louder in turns. He swallowed, telling himself the shiver down his spine was a stray raindrop, but though the sound continued to fade and then grow stronger, the quieter parts weren't quite as quiet as before, and the louder parts grew too. Whatever it was getting closer. He searched all around for the source, his vision struggling to find a shape in the dark, his brain dreading the sight of a bride in her finery, but saw nothing. Still he heard the tinkling. Maybe there was a stray cat with a bell? He swallowed. This was too loud to be natural. The shiver down his back had become a chill. His frozen fingers were clumsy on the handlebars. What had his wife said? There was a way to keep yourself safe? What was it? He strained to remember. The sound grew louder, had stopped playing hide-and-seek with his ears. Now he could pinpoint the source. He looked left. His headlights caught a shape at the side of the road. His heart beat wildly. His auto wobbled as he slowed, and his hands grew increasingly less steady. He didn't want to look at the shadow ahead. He refused. But it could be a person needing help. As he drew closer, his eyes found small feet in delicate sandals. His gaze floated up almost unwillingly, catching the red of the figure's sari. His headlights seemed to go through her, illuminating a mangrove behind her. This was no person. Just as he was about to look into her face, he remembered his wife's warning. Never, she said, never look into the bride's eyes. Quickly he wrenched his gaze away, jerking the handlebars and swerving away. The road was slick. The auto slid and came to rest inches from a tree. He swept the road, looking for the bride, but she was gone. He struggled to breathe, realizing to his shock that he had been drifting toward her. Another few seconds, and he would have hit the tree behind her. Minutes stretched out as he caught his breath, hardly able to believe what he had seen. How close he had come to a possibly fatal accident. Until at last he was off the island and safe at home with a story to tell. One night, a young girl was playing with her dolls outside her grandmother's house. She wasn't supposed to be outside, but it was too hot in her room and she couldn't sleep. As the girl played, a firefly swooped in front of her face. She dropped her dolls and walked closer to the tree line, her grandmother's dog trotting along beside her. The fireflies were everywhere. She walked for several minutes until she stepped on a stick. The noise awoke her to how far she had gone into the woods. She turned around. She could no longer see her grandmother's house. Then she remembered her grandmother's dog, but when she searched for him beside her, he was gone. She shouted his name. "Bud!" No sound of him. She called again. "Bud!" Again. No response. "Buddy!" Maybe he was too far away to hear her. She whistled for him and then slapped her hand over her mouth. Her grandmother had warned her not to whistle in the woods, especially after dark. A rustling noise sounded behind her, and she spun, expecting to see Buddy, but there was nothing there. Then she heard a high, shrill whistle. Her heart dropped in her stomach. Her mouth suddenly dry. A whistle should have made her relax. It should have meant people, but that wasn't just any whistle. It was her whistle, the exact same pitch and cadence, the same thin, childish timbre. Then she heard a voice, her voice. "Bud!" She spun again. There was silence for a long minute, and she noticed that the frogs and crickets had stopped singing. Then, "Bud!" Her voice again, but closer. Now it sounded less like her, more wrong, flat, and mechanical. "Buddy!" The voice was very close now. She almost screamed, pressing both her hands against her mouth. It was dark, but she thought where the voice had come from, she saw an even darker shape moving on the other side of a stand of trees. It looked like a human shape, the same height and weight as her. Her lungs ached now. She forced herself to breathe. Something cold touched the side of her thigh. She jumped back and heard the growl before she could discern the source of the sound in the dark. It was Buddy. He seemed to see the shape on the other side of the trees, too. He growled and advanced on stiff legs towards the shape. The girl sagged to her knees, looping an arm around the dog for support, watching the dark shape stand there and seemingly stare at them. Then Buddy made a small bark, and the shape faded back into the night and disappeared. Buddy stood there stiff for another long second or two, then licked her cheek and took off. The girl followed him back until she could see her grandmother's house and raced inside, crying and spilling the whole tale in only a few breaths. Her grandmother's eyes widened. The girl thought she'd get a spanking, but her grandmother just squeezed her to her chest and repeated, "I told you, never whistle after dark." One night, a man lay in his bed, his mind full of dark thoughts. He was sad, you see, because he had just buried his wife. Don't be fooled that he had any love for her. No, that wasn't what brought him low. See, his wife had a very unique characteristic. She had been born with an arm of solid gold, and though she was a good woman, gentle and kind, he was a man who cared for nothing but money, and so loved that arm more than anything else about her. She was much beloved, however, in the village, and he had been forced to bury her intact, golden arm included. Finally, after the moon had set over the graveyard, and he was certain all the other villagers had turned down their lamps and gone to sleep, he couldn't stand it any longer, and snuck out of his house, dug down into her grave, opened her coffin, cut off her arm, and stole it. And though he was a man greedy enough to do such a thing, when he cleaned up and returned to his bed with the arm tucked beside him, he found himself uneasy. Still, it was late, and sleep had begun to tug at his brain when he heard a voice through the window that seemed to come from down in the yard. "Who stole my golden arm?" The hair on the nape of his neck prickled at the words. He shook his head. Surely the voice was just his guilty conscience. Surely he was just dreaming. Then he heard the latch at the front door click, and, from the foot of the stairs, "Who stole my golden arm?" His heart beat like a moth trapped in a lantern. He pressed his face into the pillow. If he wasn't dreaming, he was just imagining things. Then he heard his bedroom doorknob turn, and closer again, in the room. "Who stole my golden arm?" He squeezed his eyes shut, actually shivering now in fear. Then, right in his ear, he heard, "Who stole my golden arm?" He couldn't help opening his eyes, and there, in front of him, was his wife's face,
eyes glazed, lips blue with death. Now he could barely breathe. She stared at him, milky eyes accusing. Then, "You've got it!"
Thanks for listening. Please drop us a like and subscribe. In the following days, look for more stories, both true and fictional, and explorations of all things creepy and unexplained. If you have a story to share, drop an email to the address in the description. Until next time, think twice before you look behind you in the mirror. There may be something on the other side.